Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. It is Sunday night. It is the time for the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Just for you. And we look at life through a biblical lens. Tonight we're going to look at some current events, some things that have happened this week while you were busy working, doing other things, weren't really paying a whole lot of attention, but they come together in a weird sort of way in terms of the fabric of our society. And over time, some of these things really become important. Our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is reportedly ramping up pressure on colleges who continue to use affirmative action in their admissions processes. Now, we've been doing this for 50 years. If administrators continue to pick students based on the color of their skin, as opposed to considerations, minuscule, obscure things like, test scores, they can now expect a lawsuit. This is according to an internal memo obtained by the New York Times. In the memo, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division announced it was looking for lawyers interested in working on, quote, investigations and possible litigation related to intentional race-based discrimination in college and university admissions. You do realize that basic college degrees, the bachelor's degrees and some of the more basics, has become total waste of time. They're not even worth hardly the paper they're written on anymore. And this is all part of that mix. They've had to dumb things down because they're pulling in people who really may not have been ready for college. Critics include some Department of Justice staff who refused to work on the project because it is contrary to the office's long-running approach to civil rights and education opportunities. Civil rights groups are jumping into the fray. They want to be heard. Lambda Legal, an LGBT civil rights group, called the announcement a new low for the Department of Justice. A new low or a return to a real high? What sort of doctor do you want? What sort of teacher do you want? What sort of chemist do you want? Do you want one that demonstrates a high level of intelligence and ability, that earned good grades in the subject matter and knows what they're talking about and what they're doing? Or do you want one that was chosen because of their need for a free education? Now, as a disclaimer, I'm grateful that I live in a country where truly gifted children can get an education whether or not they afford it. However, those children tend to do well, even without this kind of help. America is still a great place to live, and largely because of the people who have loving hearts. But some of this stuff just does not make sense. It feels good, but it doesn't help us. President Trump went to Democrat West Virginia on Thursday last. He held a rally there. The crowds were just as big as ever. Turnaway crowds in the hundreds and thousands, according to police. He was there to press the flesh and to take his message to the people. The major cable news outlets covered this event, and yet not one of them actually mentioned the most significant part. And that was when West Virginia's Democrat governor, Governor Jim Justice, stood up at the end, using this rally to announce that he would be switching his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican the next day. That makes the governor split in this country 35 to 15 in favor of Republicans. Matt Walsh from the Blaze.com is reporting this week that a man has given birth to a baby. He says, I returned from vacation this week to see dozens of headlines in mainstream news outlets proclaiming something miraculous. He wonders if anybody can see a problem with this. A man has given birth to a baby. What's wrong with that sentence? Well, it isn't true. It can't be true. The trans man who birthed this child is actually a woman. Oops. You see, a woman who takes hormone pills and wears men's shirts and pants is still a woman. If we were to adjust the headline to make it accurate, it would have to read something like this: Woman with inordinate amount of facial hair gives birth to baby. Or, woman does thing that billions of women throughout history have also done. Now, the whole thing is similar to a report that a 6-foot-tall rodent was spotted hugging children at Disney World. The fact that the giant friendly rat is actually a dude in a costume is about as relevant to the story as the fact that the pregnant man is actually a woman in flannel, which is to say, it ain't relevant. One might even say it's necessary to call it what it is. You might even go further to say that only a liar or a lunatic would recount the shenanigans of a cartoon character as if it were a real biological creature and then write headlines about a man giving birth as if a man actually did it. You see the connection here? Which kind of brings me to another subject. The Baltimore Sun is talking about high school graduates. High school graduates that can't read. I've told you this before. But Jim Hudson of the Hartford County Board of Education said at the July 17th meeting, I am appalled that a graduate of high school in this county could not read a note I wrote. He added that in his opinion, the school board is graduating students who are functionally illiterate and they're doing it on purpose. He told the board he'd given a note written in cursive to a woman who just graduated from their high school. The paper reported that this woman struggled to read it and avoided making any attempt in front of him to do so. So why is this news? This has been happening for at least 30 years. And it's happening because we teach children to read with a system called sight reading. We never did that before. We didn't do that until the 1940s. My generation got to be the guinea pigs. It was always phonetic, sounding out the letters. If you teach a child how to sound out letters and explain the rules governing the 3 A sounds, for example, and so forth, in a very short period of time, you can put anything you want in front of them and they can read it. They might not get the emphasis in the right place because they've never seen the word and it's 7 syllables long, but they can read the word. Phonetic reading produces children that read anything you put in front of them, whether or not they actually know what they're reading. I had the privilege with the folks in our church in 1979 to start a Christian school. And we used this system, the phonetic system, and we guaranteed our parents that if you put that child, your 4-year-old, sometimes 3, but at least 4 or 5-year-old in our what do we call it? I forgot what we called it now. We can call it kindergarten or something else. But you put them in that thing, unless they had some sort of legitimate biological problem, they would be reading anything you gave them by Christmas. And then we stood them up in front of the parents at the Christmas party and showed it how it worked. What changed? What changed was the American education system. A fellow by the name of Thomas Dewey, I think it was Thomas, doctor, a psychologist, a behavioral modificationist, is called the father of a modern American education. And he said out loud that he wanted to turn these classrooms into a psychological laboratory. And that is exactly what he has done. We are not educating children so much as we are indoctrinating children. You wonder why? They can't read. And a huge percentage, upwards of 40-some% of our high school graduates and now our adult population are either functionally illiterate or almost. I think that's deliberate. They don't read not more than a Twitter, 144 characters. They don't read books. They don't know anything except what somebody tells them. They're very visual, easily manipulated. Experts in the United States have shown that they can preserve brains and bodies in a state of suspended animation, where they freeze an individual to sub-zero temperatures and then revive them at any time of choosing in the future. Researchers have so far only achieved this in zebrafish embryo, but it's a major breakthrough, as 60 years worth of similar testing has proven unsuccessful. What's the problem? Well, the problem is when you freeze something, it tends to expand. And as it does, it destroys the cells. And so what they have done in solving this problem is they've added antifreeze. No, it's not a joke. But even with the antifreeze, there were significant tissue damage during the defrosting phase. Only 10% of the embryos survived and continued to grow as normal. Only 10%. But hey, it's a process. Note, these are embryos, not eggs. This means human beings. Remember last week we were talking about altering DNA in embryos? Yeah, 70 years ago this kind of stuff would be unlawful. You'd go to jail. Here's a little bit of encouragement for you, though. Several members of the Trump administration have been engaging in a weekly Bible study led by Ralph Drollinger of Capital Ministries. Drollinger believes this administration is filled with more Christians committed to their faith than perhaps ever in America's history. He said, quote, "These are godly individuals that God has raised up and put in a position of prominence in our culture." Well, maybe not all of them. Maybe not godly in the biblical sense. But we're straining at a gnat here. Some of President Trump's cabinet members who regularly attend the studies are Health Secretary Tom Price, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue, CIA Director Mike Pompeo, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Seemingly good people all. And don't forget the Vice President. And the President as well. Drollinger shared his amazement at the work God is doing in the lives of the White House staff, saying, quote, "It's the best Bible study I've ever taught in my life. They are so teachable. They are so noble. They are so learned." Drollinger's particular praise for Jeff Sessions, saying he will go out the same day I teach him something and I'll see him do it on camera. And I just think, wow, these guys are faithful, available, teachable, and they're at Bible study every week they're in town. Vice President Pence is there whenever he's available. President Trump is invited and receives transcripts of the teachings. And Drollinger says, I just praise God for him. And I praise God for Mike Pence, who I think, with Donald Trump, chose great people to lead our nation. Now, you know me, skeptic that I am. I went online. Who is this guy, Drollinger? What is this organization? They can't be that good. They're probably liberal. I mean, why would it make it into the paper? Why would it be this much going on if it wasn't something? I mean, they're not like me. Well, nobody is. But I looked and I looked. I did everything I could do from my humble position. And I couldn't find anything wrong with this guy or this ministry. And so I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that these people are getting some solid Bible instruction. And you got to know, these are the people who need it, with what they're having to deal with. That's kind of a rundown on the things that are happening. We're going to get into it now. We're going to talk to you a little bit about this day of mourning that Israel celebrates every year. This year is very, very special, so stay tuned.